Welcome to the Depths of Motherhood podcast, the show that is ready to go deep into the exploration of raising wildlings in today's world and how to tap into your innate wisdom. Hosted by Danielle Baker, a Women's Circle facilitator, doula, and passionate mother. Danielle welcomes guests onto the show who are dedicated to positively influencing the world of pregnancy, birth, parenting, and humaning in general. Join us to debunk the myths and reveal truths that will realign you back to your true nature. Mothering in today's world may seem overwhelming at times. This podcast aims to cut through the noise to share with you information to support you on your journey. If you love this podcast, show your support by signing up to the Depths of Motherhood Patreon, starting from as little as $3. If you join the highest tier, you'll gain access to the Women's Circle Online, run by Danielle, where she shares weekly live gatherings, sharing tools for body literacy, womb healing, radical rest, and a space to explore conversations for rewilding. All classes are recorded and stored in the Living Library. If you're listening, you can receive 50% off monthly membership by clicking the link in the show notes.
Welcome everybody to the Depths of Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Danielle. Today, Sophie Messenger joins us on the show. Sophie is a prenatal educator, coach, and healer, and the author of Why Postnatal Recovery Matters. Sophie facilitates self-growth. She doesn't claim to be a guru or pretend to have all the answers, and she knows that she is still on the journey herself. But as she goes along her journey, she is connecting to this innate wisdom. She is bringing this into the world through online courses and her books that she is writing. She wants people to regain that trust in themselves, to develop their own skills and find a way that feels right for you. So at the heart of all the teachings, whether they're online or face-to-face, that no size fits all, that everything is about tuning in to our own personal, unique needs. Developing intuition is a part of self-trust. Her courses are all about developing intuition so that we can start to trust ourselves. And in this conversation, there was such a free-flowing energy as we explored the world of Rebozos, and that is just one name used for them. So we're talking about this piece of material that has been used throughout time, throughout different cultures, to support the mother and baby, whether it is prenatally, during labor, and postpartum, and even exploring how to use these wrapping techniques during your period. And I love how she brings the history and the science and the current world situations to light and merges them so that we have a better idea about how we can care for ourselves, our baby, and our family. And through this conversation, I really feel myself being channeled back to my intuition and realizing the ways that I had looked to other people outside of me for information about my own body. And actually, as I moved through my own experience, I came back to the original idea or belief of what was good for me. Every journey is unique and there are always lessons to learn, but I love how Sophie always guides us back to our own intuition, asking these questions. Does that feel good for you? She also talks about the postpartum phase and the pillars that she uses to support mothers in this time of ensuring that they can rest deeply and drop into the fourth trimester, and so that this well-nourished woman can then go on to support and nourish her children. You can find all of Sophia's information in the show notes with links to her website and her social media. It's been such a great reminder to edit it so many months later and put this out there into the world. I also want to just take a moment to do a big shout out to everyone. I really, really appreciate you being here and supporting us just by listening and maybe sharing this podcast with others who you think could benefit from it. So if you do have the time to leave us a review, then that would be absolutely amazing. I've actually never asked before to be left a review, but I'm realizing now how important it is to ensure that our podcast is seen. And so I'm still learning, even though we're 16 months in with this podcast. I am just so new to this really, and I'm learning every day. If you would like to support us, we do have the Patreon, the links in the show notes. And if you join the Patreon, then you can get access to our online membership as well called Women's Circle Online. And here we meet for weekly gatherings to learn more about our bodies, to remember the language of our body and reconnect to our womb space. And that can be through workshops, embodiment practices, moon circles, hands-on holistic therapies that you can do for yourself. So much. I can't remember everything off the top of my head. And we also have experts coming in and speaking every single month. So I hope to see you in there. Right now, the membership is $25 per month, and you get access to all our past recordings as well. Okay, so let us just tune into our body a little bit. Noticing your breath to begin. And awareness in the left and the right nostril as you observe which nostril is being used more dominantly. So maybe you feel the air coming in more through the left or through the right, and just to notice that without trying to change anything, recognizing the sensation through the nostril and following the breath all the way deep into the body and seeing where that inhale breath lands. As you do this, notice the softness that comes with the exhale. Giving permission for yourself to land in this space, to receive and connect to these words. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. Welcome everybody to the Depths of Motherhood podcast. Welcome, Sophie.
Hi, Danielle. Well, thank you. I'm really delighted to be here with you today.
Yes, we made it through the time zones, through the storms. We're finally here. It's wonderful to see you. So I'd love to start out by you sharing with our audience what it is that you do with your sacred time. What is your passion?
Deep at heart, when people say, what is it that you do? I always think, how long have you got? Because what I do doesn't have a title that cover everything I do, but deep at heart, what I'm about is empowering people to follow their hearts. And, I've spent the last 10 years working as a doula. This is something I've just retired from. I'm still a perinatal educator and a healer and author, but there's no word to describe what I do. So it probably easier to talk a little bit about a little bit of history of how I ended up doing what I'm doing and how it's always evolving, so to speak. So
yeah,
I was a scientist for 20 years, and when my first child was born, I had a complete change of heart. I went from being really scared of birth to having a really amazing home birth experience. So we've rewired my brain. There's no other way. Today, when I read books like Rachel Reed and talking about childbirth as a rite of passage, I'm like, that's what I had. I was like, it felt like I'd been through my own psychedelic adventure with my own endorphins, and it completely changed my focus. In fact, I remember it started to change when I was pregnant. Yeah. It's a really interesting thing. One of the things I've noticed is when I'm it's time for me to move away from something I've done for a while, is I get the feeling like in my scientific career, I remember sitting in a meeting while I was pregnant and thinking, I'm bored. Yeah. And I thought, shit, what now? Do you see? And so there's always a period of like a gap when I just think, okay, I can't do that anymore. So what now? And I'm in that gap right now. So I'll tell you more about that in a bit. But I retrained to be an antenatal teacher, a baby wearing instructor, and a doula. And after a few years, I left my scientific career behind for good. So I went to a birth on my day off as a last minute backup for someone. And that was in 2012. And on the Monday, I went back to work and I was like, what am I doing here? This is so much more interesting. And 3 months later, I gave my notice to my scientific job. And I spent quite a few years just working with parents, and somehow organically, because it's the theme that happens in my life, I often end up doing things because people ask me to. I organically ended up moving from teaching parents to teaching professionals. It just happened. Do you see what I mean? I didn't set out to make it happen.
And like so opening.
Yeah. So, I ended up was teaching little workshops to a small group of people in my house, and it just grew and grew and grew. And before 2020, at some point, I was teaching 2 or 3 workshops a month. I was traveling up and down, like live workshops, face to face. I was traveling up and down the UK. I even traveled abroad. I went to Dubai and Belgium. And then 2020 happened, and I got my first, the first 3 months of lockdown, and I was like, everything slowed down. I was like, I can't go back to this level of intensity of traveling and teaching. And also because we couldn't, I started creating online courses, and that seems to be the theme of what I'm doing now. Is I've created a lot of online courses. Tomorrow I'm starting my next one on postnatal wrapping. It's always about blending traditional knowledge with modern world. It's like, it's no wonder I was a scientist. I've got a PhD in biology, and I'm also a complete woo hippie person. So I bridge the two. That's my favorite way of working. Being at birth reignited the sort of, I've always been interested in energy work. I trained as a Reiki practitioner in 2003, but after I did start to attend births, I was like, this was completely reignited, and I ended up training to be a Reiki practitioner, a Reiki teacher, and then I did Reiki drum training as a practitioner and the Reiki drum teaching. So drumming has been a big part of my work as well.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I've managed to hit my bucket list of drumming at birth. So I've done at home birth, in the birth center, and in the delivery unit.
Oh, that's incredible.
But the last time I remember I drummed in a delivery unit, I was like, yep, normal. No big deal.
I love that. You're making it normal to have the drum there. We just released an episode so yesterday, and that was all about drumming. And it was so beautiful because there's so many benefits, and the way that it just brings you back into your body and into this state of harmony, which you'll know all about.
Yeah.
It was actually, I was drawn to you through a friend because they were telling me about your online course, The Closing of the Bones. And I was so intrigued when I saw your courses because you really get into the Rebozo, the explanation of it, which I think is so necessary, because what I'm seeing is many people using the Rebozo through different stages. So in pregnancy, and then in labor, and then postnatally.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get into that. Like, what is the history of the Rebozo, and do we actually need a specific kind of material to do this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I came to this practice via the Mexican and South American. So I learned closing the bone from the Ecuadorian tradition, and I learned about Rebozo from the Mexican tradition. And I'm still learning because, a month ago, I went to a workshop with Now Living Ever, who came to the UK, and I learned yet more stuff, even though I'm not attending births anymore, because I feel this is very fascinating subject for me. And what I'm a complete knowledge freak. So I love, after I learned closing the bone in 2013, I started asking everyone I met, what did you have in your country after birth? Did you have any binding? Did you have any practice that involved like tightening scarves around the body? And I quickly became aware that it's a universal practice. And the really interesting thing that my friend Laura, who's from Colombia, told me, she said this very likely came to South America via the slave trade. And in fact, Naoli herself says that the Mexican Rebozo, whilst they were cloths before that were used by indigenous people in Mexico, the actual Rebozo came from Spain.
Wow.
And the other day I found myself wondering, since we all came from, apparently, according to anthropology, we all came from Africa.
Right.
And I'm kind of thinking it might have all come from there, but we don't know. But for me, it's a universal practice. And so it's a very complex topic, because on one hand, I think it's really important to acknowledge the heritage it comes from, and to acknowledge that a Rebozo is a particular cloth, that's woven in Mexico.
So and that's the reason what it means. Like Rebozo is the Mexican cloth woven in a specific way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there are Rebozos in other parts of South America as well. But so I understand in different countries they're called sometimes Shalina, sometimes Manta. It depends. I'd be curious to hear if there's anything in Costa Rica. But
Yeah, not that I found so far.
so my process has always been to encourage people to work with what they've got. And I think for me, the gift of all the practice of being a baby wearing instructor meant that I'd already acquired that knowledge of the usage of fabric through women's life before I came to Closing the Bones, because I started training. When I trained as a baby wearing instructor in the UK in 2010, there was no training in the UK. I had to fly people from Germany.
Wow.
Because back then it wasn't a thing. Do you see what I mean? So I've always been, it's funny because I look at my scientific career and then I look at my birth working career, and I've always been a pioneer. Many, many times in, for instance, the work I've done in the UK, I've had to fight with insurance companies to create an insure the course I was doing, or insure people that trained, because they'd never heard of this and they weren't interested. It's the same with baby wearing. And then the same with the Closing of the Bones, and the same with Rebozo, because when they can't see a market, the insurance companies are not interested. But what I feel is, I encourage people to work with what they've got, and I also find that because the Rebozo has a really lovely quality of the weave that makes it cool. I've not come across many other cloths that are as ideal in their ability to both have sturdiness and flexibility around the body. I'm sure there must be other things in other countries. It's just I've not. The other thing that come close to that is a baby wearing wrap, like a short one, because baby wearing wraps that are 4.5 meters long are too long to practice Rebozo techniques with. But I always tell people, do work with what you've got. Don't feel that it only works with the Rebozo. Whilst I'm a nerd and I love the idea of working with the actual cloth, and that is what the word I'm looking for, the heritage is from.
You have this passion for that.
but I'm also I've accumulated cloth from so many different countries, and I'm always fascinated to see the parallels. So for instance, in France we get a lot of futa towels. They're from Tunisia. They're a bit like Turkish towels, and I found there's futa massage in the traditional Turkish steam baths. And when I trained a Moroccan birth worker, she went back to Morocco and started offering that, and the women said, well, I've had that in the hammam. So it's everywhere. I've had it in Russia, I've found it in India, I've found it in Asia. It's in every continent. Really. So that's why I feel very strongly that people should work with what they feel called to. Even though I personally love Rebozos, I have a relationship with several small weaving companies. It's very important to me to make sure that what I buy is paying the weavers a fair wage, and it's a small business.
Do you sell them on your shop? You have a shop online?
Yeah, I have. I've developed through the years. Again, when I was telling you, I don't make things happen. People make it happen because they ask me. I never planned to sell Rebozos. I was like, I don't want to sell product. I want to teach. And then people came to my workshops. And back then, when I started teaching in 2014, people couldn't get any Rebozos in the UK. It was all I'd got mine through a doula who had developed a relationship with a Mexican, weaver. And people were saying, where can I get a Rebozo? So I started through that doula. I found a person who was selling some who sent me some from Mexico.
Oh, that's great.
And then and I started bringing them only to my workshop with no intention of having an online shop, just bringing them to the people training with me. And then, of course, word of mouth means that a couple of years later, I was constantly receiving emails from people saying, my friend says you have a Rebozo. And I was like, I had to take all these pictures, and then 15 emails later, the person would tell me what they wanted, and after a couple of years of that, I was like, I need an online shop. This is ridiculous.
Totally happened organically.
I create an online shop, and I guess, it's a really funny thing, because the last 6 months or so, I've realized I've got ADHD. It only became very clear with the menopause that I have ADHD, the perimenopause that I have ADHD. And now I realize the gift of the ADHD is hyper-focusing. And all my life in my work, I've always become, when I learn about a new topic, I nerd out so much on that topic. It's no wonder that because I can't stop learning. I don't understand what it's like to not be curious. I'm like, I want to know. Like I'm the nightmare students when I go to course because I'm always raising my hand. I'm like, what about this? What about that?
I love that. I love it.
And this is kind of, so coming back to your question about what to use, I've trained midwife in Rebozo techniques, and I said, I know you guys have problems with infection control and regulation in a hospital. So use what you've got, use bedding, use towels.
Right.
Last night I received a text that really made my day because I work very closely with an osteopath in Cambridge. I've worked with him since 2014. And this weekend, his girlfriend they had their first baby. And he said that the Rebozo saved the day. That's what allowed them to stay at home and not need to go to the hospital. And he said he used the Rebozo I'd given him to hang from the door, but to do the shaking the apples on his partner's, he used a towel because he had just one Rebozo. And I thought, that's what I've told people, just use a towel, use a pashmina. I don't want parents, for instance, to feel they have to invest in a special scarf. I want them to know that they can use what they already have. With the only caveat that once I rocked up in a pregnant woman's home, she wanted to do techniques to help turn a breech baby. And I said, well, if you have any scarf of your own, we can work with that. So you can carry on with your partner. And what she brought was like a Harry Potter knitted scarf. And I said, wonders about that. Like the twice the width of my hand. I was like, that's not gonna do.
There's like limitations.
Yeah, you need so to work with a piece of cloth that's gonna allow you to do some of the techniques we do with traditionally with Rebozos, you need something that's at least 50 to 60 centimeter wide and usually at least a couple of meters long. So the average pashmina, for instance, works really well.
I'm really glad that you said this, because there is so much pressure on buying everything, getting everything shipped in, or spending so much money. Like, just take a look around your house and see what you have and practice with it.
That's what I'm telling people. So tomorrow night I teach the first live Zoom class of my postnatal wrapping class, and I'm gonna tell my students to go root around their own cupboards and find every piece of cloth that they have that they think could do.
That's a really cool exercise, actually. I feel like I'm going to do that myself today. I'm going to
because talking back to the baby wearing thing, when I was my first year as a doula, when I had clients who were foreign, I was like, oh, what do you use to carry babies? I didn't know about Rebozos, and what do you use to carry babies in your country? And my client was from South Africa, and she was going back to South Africa, and I said, can you bring me back the cloth that people carry babies in? And she said, well, there's no such thing, Sophie. And I said, what do you mean? She said, there is a cloth called a kikoi, which is like a sarong. And people use it to carry babies, and they use it as a piece of clothing, and they use it as a blanket, very much like the Rebozo. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course. A shawl, a scarf,
right.
It's not ever going to be limited to just doing one thing, right? People will use it through their whole life. They will use it as a piece of clothing. They will use it to carry their babies. They will use it to cover their head. They will use it to, and in fact, in the Rebozo's case, the women would be buried with it. It would be used as a shroud.
Wow.
And so
it's got so much
it's through the whole life, the pieces of cloth that people have used. And we used to have that too in the Western world. It's just that shawls have kind of fallen out of fashion.
Right.
But what I found is people in hot countries, they have thin cotton like a sarong type fabric, and people in cold countries, they have more like woolen thick things. Right.
After I gave birth, I would wrap my hips with this Rebozo I had.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, this is why I have this. I have this for this reason. And then one day my sling, I think it got dirty. So it was in the washing machine. Yeah. And she always sleeps on me with the sling. And I was like, well, I haven't got anything. I'm just going to use this Rebozo.
Yeah.
And it worked. And I was like, oh, this is great. And it's so simple. And you're like, of course, this is what's been used.
I know. The number of times I've carried a client babies in my scarf in the winter. Because I've been, I remember rocking up to accompany a client to a hospital appointment. So that postpartum, the mother had some challenge in the sort of with bladder and stuff. And so she asked me to come with her so I could hold the baby while she went to see the hospital physio. And she'd not brought a sling, and this baby was in the pushchair and started to cry. And it was winter. I had a scarf around my neck, so I, put the
You're
baby
like,
in there.
ta-da!
And I tell everybody this is like parenting 101. Everybody should have
Right.
a scarf that they can use as an emergency carrier.
It's like the
Because
perfect
I've had
gift,
that
actually.
myself. My husband rocked up dropping off my daughter once when I was busy preparing an antenatal class room. And he said, I've forgotten the car seat, so I can't bring her back from the childminder because. So he walked with her from the childminder, dropped her off at halfway through the way home, where I was busy preparing my antenatal classroom. And then once I'd finished setting the room, because I often used to set the room, then go home and make dinner and stuff, and then come back to teach later. And I was like, oh crap, I've got a 2-year-old and no sling. So I made a makeshift carrier with a scarf I had around my neck.
It's
You
so
know,
fulfilling to be able to do that, though, because you're like, I
yeah.
don't need
And
to
I've
buy
taught so
anything.
many parents how to do that.
You know what?
The
Do you ever feel like people mention about it, the safety aspect? Because that was for me. I was like, what if she falls out? Because I haven't bought this. Someone hasn't designed it for a baby. These were the thoughts that were going through my mind.
yeah, yeah.
Mm,
It's interesting, isn't it? We live in a
really, how
culture
we've
where
been
we feel
brainwashed.
somebody needs to give us permission to do
Exactly. Right.
things.
Exactly. This is safe. Use this.
Yeah.
How
I
come?
tell you the really exciting conversation I had last week with a French woman
Uh-huh.
who is working. So she's a French doula who is also a seamstress, and she's working with a traditional Greek historian who has found in an ancient Greece history evidence of a belt that was used for women. Because what I've also learned is those belts, they weren't used, like the faja and stuff like that, some of the chumbe bed from Colombia, they weren't just used for postpartum and pregnancy, they were used as a tool throughout the whole of a woman's life
What
to
is it? Like,
protect the
what
womb.
kind of, what? It's a belt?
So
Maybe we can Google it.
I'll show you one of the ones I have made. You will see we are on the podcast, you can't see, but I have had a
Oh,
long
yeah.
scarf that's 3 meter long, woven for me
Uh-huh.
in Mexico by the weavers, one of the companies that I make Rebozos from. I said to them, can you make this for me? But then when I was talking to this French woman, my belt I've just shown you is based on the Colombian chumbe, traditional indigenous belt that my friend Laura said, you got given one of those belts when you got your first periods.
Oh.
And she was telling me recently that it helps with endometriosis because in a spiritual way, the traditional midwife she worked with said that people who have endometriosis, it's because the lining of the womb is lacking community and they're reaching out to the community. And so when you wrap yourself on a spiritual level, it helps contain that. And she said she sent her belt to her cousin with endometriosis, and her cousin is saying it's really helping with the pain.
Wow. And so is that just wrapped around the pelvis area?
Yeah. And so this French woman I was talking to, she said that they've designed a European version based on the traditional ancient Greece belts that were also what they call ceinture de femme, women's belt.
Right.
I call mine a womb belt, but it's
Mm.
much more than just a pregnancy and postpartum tool.
Ah.
I have experimented with wrapping my hips. When I was still having a cycle, I experimented wrapping my hips because I always felt energetically that when I was bleeding, it felt quite similar to the postpartum, but smaller.
Yes.
And as I started teaching people how to wrap, which is why I'm doing this course, because I'm doing this course so I can teach people that there's many, many, many ways you can do it. And there's no one way that's better than the other. It's about working with what feels right for you.
I also have been after I gave birth, I just mentioned I used the Rebozo around my
Yeah.
hips, but then I started to use it when I was on my period. My period came
Yeah.
back very quickly, like maybe 5 months, even though I was breastfeeding. And I started to do it again because the contractions I was feeling in my womb when my first period were pretty strong. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it again. And I loved it. It felt so cozy and just like a big hug. And I
Yeah,
haven't stopped since. And it's also a reminder to like my partner, I'm on my period right now. So just be gentle, like be a
yeah,
bit
yeah,
more
yeah, yeah,
mindful. And for myself as well. Like when I
yeah.
have that on, I'm like, remember to rest. And I think it's just really great. And I actually have a question about the wrapping of it because would it make a difference? So if I wrapped it higher, for example, just underneath my belly button,
Yeah.
would it be preferred for the body for it to be lower or higher up? Would it make a difference?
I tend to think it's a very personal thing.
Mm,
That's why I like to give people options. Try this, what feels good, because that's been how I've taught ever since I started teaching. I've always been in the sense that my job is like I have a blog post where I call myself a buffet curator, because my job is to put the buffet in front of you, but your job is to choose the dishes. I'm not in your body. And I
I love
found it
that.
really wonderful meeting traditional midwife now living Navarre, because that's exactly what she says as well. She says there's no
Mm,
such thing as too tight, not tight enough, or how long you do it for. It's ask the women, always ask the women, and that's
mm,
always what I've done. You know, I mean, I remember years ago in 2015, I was teaching a course, and my doula mentor, said to me she really liked the way I taught, and I said, "Oh, what is it you liked?" And she said, "You're saying to people, this is what I've got. Take what you need from it.
mm.
You're not saying do it like me."
Yeah, that's really
And I
great because it gives people a chance
intuitively,
to
I've
freedom.
always felt, because I've had so many experience again with the baby wearing, of like people
Yeah.
saying to me, which sling do you think is the best? And I said, well, it's like choosing a pair of jeans.
Yeah.
Like you don't know until you try it, like what fits
Mm,
good. It also needs to fit your lifestyle. In the sling world, there are big wrap scarves that some people love, and some people look at that and they think, it looks like origami. I don't know where to start from there. I'd rather have something a bit more structured. And because I played with all these tools myself, I was like, they're like jeans, but they're also like shoes. You're not going to wear the same shoes if you go to a wedding and if you go hike on a mountain. So it's about having different tools. The big belt I showed you, like last summer, I remember the same week I was supporting two new mothers through the postpartum, and one of them, she had to go, and like she was a professional classic musician, she had to go and do a concert a few short weeks after the birth, and she said, I want something discreet. So she chose one of the Velcro wrap I favor. And then the other mother was like much preferred the belt I've just showed you. And I was like, and then it can be that the next day you're going to meet other people and they're going to feel exactly the opposite. So the same day, sometimes I've seen a mother who likes this type of carrier and then dislike the other one. And then the afternoon I meet somebody else and they're the other way around. And having this experience over and over again, I was like, we can't choose for people. That's not our job. Our job is to lay the tools in front of them, show them how to put them on their bodies, and then they go, I like that one. And then we say, great, that's the right one for you.
I think
But
that's
the idea that
wonderful.
we have the authority, that's so much bullshit.
Right, right.
So in the Western world, people always say, how long should I wear it? What's the best? That's why I'm doing this wrapping course. People say, is the best form of binding the Bangkok belly binding? I said, I don't know. It depends on what feels good on your body. But it pisses me off that people think that there's a right way,
Right.
because the world doesn't work like that. So the analogy I often take, which is why I wrote, when I published my book, I tried in my book about postnatal recovery, I tried to do away with like what one culture does, versus I try to take the principles, the common
Mm,
principles, because my husband's from Hong Kong, right?
mm.
So the traditional postpartum dish from Hong Kong is pig's trotters in black vinegar. Now, if you're a vegetarian, that's not going to be great for you, is it? So this is the same principle for everything. There are many ways to do things, just like there are
Mm,
many ways to be a parent, and many ways to choose. That's the beauty of being a postpartum doula, is you go into people's home. In some ways, it's almost more intimate than being at birth, because at birth you're only there
mm.
for a few hours or maybe a few
Yes.
days. But the postpartum, some people have supported for weeks or even months, and then you see how they live, and you see the huge human variety of
Yeah.
how people live, and very few people get to see so many different families. And the more I
Right.
did that, the more I was like, what I love about this job is that it's taught me that, there is no one way of living, and also I've met people who did jobs that I didn't even know existed until I met them. And the more I did that, when I was a scientist, I only met scientists in my work. And although they were all different, there was a much narrower range of people. As soon as I became a doula, I was started to see this breadth of variety. And I guess that's part of what's made it, that I'm more of a bird's eye view and a generalist person. And that's why I think it's really dangerous when people become prescriptive about anything, because it's very disempowering. The prescriptivity implies that we know better for the woman what she needs, and that's very much being like maternity system.
Can I pause one moment? I'm just going to bring my baby up. We can say hi. Come here. She wants to come and say hi. She's listening and learning so much. Here you go. Here we go. When you were talking about the postpartum,
I'm impressed with your multitasking, by the way. How you completely composed and cool and whilst doing your recording, whilst having your baby at the breast. I think it's wonderful.
I'm used to it. I think, when you said about being in the postpartum phase, about being feeling like an honor to be there. I remember when I was in the postpartum stage. Oh, you want me to kiss your toesies? It was like I didn't want anyone around who I didn't feel safe with. And that time is you do really see the depths of people, because everything is out, everything is open and coming back together again. And I just think, like it's such an honor to be there. And a reminder as well that relationship that you create with your doula or your support team is so important for that time afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what would you say, what are the most important areas to really nourish in the postpartum phase? What things stand out for you the most?
So I talk about the 4 pillars of the postpartum.
Yes.
Which the first of which is community support or social support. You can't do the other 3 without that. Yes, that's the bottom line. And of course, talking about so social support, rest, food, and body work. And the social support is the bottom of the, the one on which, it's the foundation. Yeah. You can't do the other 3 without support. You can't do it on your own. And of course, to illustrate what you recall what you just said, you can't do the postpartum support nurturing well if your people who are there, they don't have you at heart, and they're in it from themselves, right? They need to be selfless. They need to think, what does she need? What does she want? And again, putting you, for me, in the driver's seat, and not the traditional postpartum where some mother-in-law turns up and bosses you around, because that's not the world we live in. Yeah. So the community support is really paramount, because how are you going to get food, rest, and body work if you're on your own? And then the rest should go without saying. Every culture around the world, including the Western one, but we've forgotten that, has or used to have a period of a month during which the mother didn't lift a finger. All she did is lay in bed and rest and feed the baby and get to know the baby and recover. And then, of course, then she would also be fed very specific postpartum nutrient-rich food, which are going to be specific for each culture. But, the same themes are present across the board. And then the 4th pillar is the body work. And that's, in the Western world, the most neglected out of the 4, because I think people still have some kind of sense that you need, a bit of rest. And people talk about the tiredness of new motherhood, even though the mother, she's considered to be a vessel once the baby's out, and nobody's interested in the mother, which is really stupid. On a couple of days from now, I'm co-launching a new book from the same publisher. I published my book with Pinto and Martin, and it's called Your Postpartum Body. And I've read that book because it's been sent to me as a PDF, and the mother talks about that. The author talks about the fact that once your baby's out of your body, I've always witnessed that myself. Nobody's really interested in you. So the body work stuff is, the more I learn about it, the more I think it's absolutely bonkers that given the changes the body undergoes during pregnancy and the postpartum, that there's no standard physical check to make sure it's all gone back where it belongs. And the traditional postpartum, the world around has manipulation that are quite similar to empirical osteopathy and massage and things to help bring the body back together.
Right.
And I like to joke that if men gave birth, there would be a bloody Cambridge professor of the postpartum. But the fact that here in the UK, and apart from France, I think it's pretty much the same everywhere. France has some level of re-education, what they call re-education perineal, some perineum exercise you do with your midwife or a physio as part of the health system that's free, but it's still only focused on the perineum, rebuilding your pelvic floor, basically.
Right. Yes. I've actually heard of
You
that.
see me
My
going
friend gave
squeeze
birth there.
with my
Yes.
hand, but it's very focused on one part of the body. But
Yes. The holistic side.
the closing of the bone, the reason I got into all this, it was because of the closing of the bone. So I learned the closing of the bones, and then I went around asking all the mothers. Cambridge is very multicultural. My kids were in primary school, and I was following the mothers in the playground going, what did you have in your country? I became known as a weird lady who followed, non-Caucasian women around going, what did you have? And I started building a story in my mind of this not absolutely mind-blowing nurturing practices that people had, and then side by side. So the nurturing stories I got, like my friend from India, she said, well, back home, my mom hired an old lady from the village who came to give me a full body massage every day for a month.
Wow.
Every day for a month.
Nice.
Yeah, so it sounds nice to me. I'm not postpartum. I wouldn't say no to that. And then my friend from Kenya, she said that people would fight over who would make you dinner and you wouldn't even wash yourself.
That's so nice.
And then side by side to that, I would go into the home of new mothers in Cambridge where I live, and I would witness the lack of support, the fact that all the presents were for the baby, the fact that often they had no food but 15 bouquets of flowers.
Right.
And I was watching all this, and the worst of it is I also watch women blame themselves for their struggles.
Right.
And like I still remember this day, this client of mine said, "Oh, you don't understand why I'm so tired." And I'm like, "You're tired because you have a 3-month-old and a 3-year-old."
Right.
And she
The
said, "But everybody's coping better than I am." And I said, "No, everybody is lying.
They're on Instagram."
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this image that's put out, right? Like bouncing back, and life should be a certain way. And it's so interesting, actually, because as you talk about this, it touches me deep in my heart, because I know I didn't get that. And also through choices I made, I didn't put myself in a position to get that support. But also I did try to, every week I would get some kind of body work. And I remember one time, Araya was about 2 months old, and I went for a massage, and I didn't know the woman. She didn't know me apart from I just given birth. And the massage was so painful, and I didn't speak up. I didn't tell her. And I just laid there and received this massage. And then afterwards, I felt so like abused and upset with myself because I didn't say no. And so much stuff came up for me, and I actually got sick after it, because I think there were some real deep releases in there of things. And I felt like, oh, like I just want to be home. Like I want to be held with people that really love me and can feel me. And because it's such an intuitive practice to do body work. And
I know
that's like, if anyone's listening, just really check out who's going to be touching your body. Like what is important to them, and do you have this relationship that you can trust that person with your body? They're going to be fully present with you as things are arising.
I always tell people, one of the things I do find difficult with like messaging English women is that English people are often very much like the experience you described. If the massage is crap, they're not going to tell you because they don't want to upset you. Right. And when I've massaged women who are, say, French or, Spanish, or not from basically Britain, would say, "Oh, more oil here is not strong enough there. You more this, less that." And I was like, "Great, this is." And so I always tell women before I do a massage, you need to tell me if it feels too strong, not strong enough. I usually watch their face like a hawk for signs of discomfort. And I
Yes.
know, because new mothers' bodies are usually very tender,
Right.
that I have to be very, very careful with my hands, that the
Right.
level of depth of massage that the very new mother, I've massaged women as early as 24 hours post-birth, which is when it's
Mm,
the most beneficial, by the way, because
mm,
another big bugbear of mine is in the UK. They say, oh, shouldn't have a massage until you're 6 weeks postpartum, and you write your 6 weeks check with your doctor, except the doctor doesn't check you, right? So there's this kind of weird tick box that people think
right.
once you've had that 6 weeks check, which is just a chat,
Right.
you're
It's
somehow a clean bill of health. And I'm like, when I discussed it with massage therapists, they all told me that it was like an insurance thing. So
right.
when I've
Of
massaged
course.
very new mothers, you have to be careful with your hands because the body is still really tender. So
Right.
it's about being soft and gently going in.
It's a
And whereas
fully
when I
being
massage
present.
people who have like, not postpartum at all, often I can go a lot deeper, but again, it depends a lot on the
Yes.
person.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? The 6 week mark. Okay, it's 6 week now. You can have sex, you can do exercise, you can do
Yeah,
this and you can do that. It's like, really? Like, oh, come on. Like, this is insane. And I'm really
yeah,
glad that we brought this up because just learning, practicing to speak your truth is so powerful
yeah,
because we need to do that too because there's one responsibility of the person who's supporting you to intuit what's happening, but I feel that we've become really good at being able to display something that isn't our truth.
mm,
So even if you're with an intuitive practitioner, you might be really good at faking that you're okay. So just
yeah,
being able to speak your truth is so powerful. And one thing that I've been working with a lot recently, if you can't say the words, you can say how you feel in the sensation. Like, I'm feeling, as we talk about this, like a sensation in my chest, or as you do that, it's just feeling a little bit too tender. And
yeah.
that's really helping as I'm working with my women's circle to be able to express and share. And I find that very powerful practice of verbalizing sensations in the body if
Mm,
we can't put words to things. Mm.
yeah.
I We are coming to the end of our time, and this has been a great conversation. I'm really, really happy with the paths that we went down and the things that you've shared. Thank you so much. I'd love for you to take the stage and share anything that is coming through right now or in the future with your offerings. I know you just said you have a course coming up, but I'd love for
Yeah.
you to share.
Thank you. So my offering is mostly online now, which is the beauty of it is that I now have an international audience. When I used to teach face to face, I taught mostly in the UK, and I have I'm launching my 5th course at the moment. I have 4 online courses already available. One which is Rebozo techniques for an easier birth. So it's got pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, but it's really heavy on the birth techniques. And the other course I have with Rebozo is called the Postpartum Rebozo Massage and Closing Ritual, which is a rocking and wrapping with the Rebozo, massaging the entire body and then wrapping the body in tightening around the body in 7 different points. And I have created a course called How to Prepare for a Nurturing Postpartum, which is extended on some of the topics I talk about in my book. My book is called Why Postnatal Recovery Matters. It's published by Pinto and Martin. And then because rituals, we touched a bit on that, but rituals are a big part of my life. I like to help people bring back rituals into their life. I've created a course called How to Run a Mother Blessing. So a mother blessing is a mother-centered alternative to a baby shower. And it's a beautiful way to prepare for a nurturing postpartum. So all these work mesh with one another. And then the new course I'm launching tomorrow is called we're mid-October, is called The Art and Science of Postpartum Wrapping. And it's about, the reason I created this course is because I saw that lots of people thought there was one way of wrapping. And I was like, I could see all this range of ways of wrapping the belly and hips in the postpartum, but not only through the whole life as a tool of support. And I just felt that, we needed to, the main reason beside the sort of breadth of topic that I want to empower people to go away and teach to others what they feel comfortable teaching, but also offering women, this is what you could try, and then have a range of tools that they can offer to their clients. Is I also feel it's really important to offer wrapping because I found that postpartum wrapping is a universal practice, but also out of all the, when I was saying earlier, there's not enough body work. There's the most neglected aspect of postpartum recovery in the Western world. The only practice that you can do for yourself is the wrapping. So you can't, well, you can massage yourself, but it's not really as effective as being nurtured by people. You can't really close your own bones. You can't really be your own osteopath, your own chiropractor, or your own female health physiotherapist. But the wrapping is simple. It's very easy. So I demystify the entire process to show to people it really doesn't require a lot of knowledge. That's something anybody can do, and anybody can empower other people to feel that they can do it as well. And it's comforting. It gives you support to lose muscle and ligaments. It keeps you warm, which is a big part of postpartum tradition, keeping the new mother warm. And it just feels like it helps you spiritually and emotionally as well, like to be feeling like you're being cocooned in something. I have a whole range of wraps I use for myself, and when my daughter started having her periods a couple of weeks ago, I bought her own wrap to use, and she uses it during her periods. Because I keep saying, you when you're in the same, if you feel unwell, if you feel ill or anything like that, it's a lifelong tool for, I would say, I was going to say for women, but it's also, it benefits anybody with a pelvis, the sort of wrapping your hips and belly. I found it fascinating. Sorry, I'm digressing a bit, but I found it fascinating that I discovered the Japanese aramaki, which is like a boob tube for your waist, because they know that keeping the core warm is really important for health. And then I told my mom about this, and my mom said, well, when you grew up in Brittany, where I lived in France, farmers used to wear stuff like that when they went out and work in the field. They knew that keeping the kidneys warm was really important. And I was like,
Oh, so
this
it's more about
wisdom is
warmth.
everywhere.
It's funny
But
because my grandma used to say, cover your midriff, like your belly up, or you're
yeah,
gonna get
yeah,
sick. I'd be
yeah,
like, it's fine.
yeah. It's it was still present in living memory, because one of my friends who gave birth to twins in the 1980s says, so when she was pregnant, her grandmother told her she should bind herself in the postpartum.
Wow. My grandma said
And
that's what the practice they did as well. She had 3 home births, and she said the only thing she could remember was that she was in bed for a week, and it was very important to wrap her stomach and her hips to keep warm.
yeah,
It's fascinating. I absolutely love how you have this the history, and then you have the science, and then you have this magical spiritual aspect, and they're all merging
thank you.
together. Very, very excited about looking more into your courses, because I am getting more time to myself right now. So I'm definitely going to dive into them. And for anyone that's listening, I'm going to leave all your information in the show notes so that they can get access to you quickly. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much for everything
Danielle.
you're
It was a
doing.
pleasure. Thank you for
Beautiful.
having me.